My name is Jim Al-Khalili, and I'm Emeritus Professor of Physics at the University of Surrey. My book is called On Time, the Physics That Makes the Universe Tick.
The beginning and end of our universe.
Now, if time is real, and if time has a direction from past to future, an arrow, then I guess the next question will be, does that arrow have a beginning and does it have an end? Did time start at some point, and will it end at some point? So let's address the idea of time having a beginning. Well, according to general relativity, time began at the Big Bang. That was the earliest moment. And very often people will say, well, how do you know there maybe have been a time before that? Well, in basic general relativity, the answer is that, what do you mean by before? There has to have been a time before the Big Bang to embed the word before in. It's a bit like I tell you to walk to the South Pole, and when you get to the South Pole, keep heading south. It's meaningless. Once you're at the South Pole, every step you take will take you back north again. That's the furthest south you can go. There is no point on the surface of the Earth further south than the South Pole. There's no point in time earlier than the first moment when time was created, along with space and matter and energy at the Big Bang. In fact, people like Stephen Hawking have even come up with ideas that suggest that there's a smoothness to space and time, that as you get closer and closer to the Big Bang, time loses its meaning. It becomes like another dimension of space. And so, in that sense, time does have a beginning. It's the moment of the Big Bang. Of course, that would be really boring if people hadn't come up with other suggestions, which of course they have, speculative ideas. For example, the notion that the Big Bang was simply the moment of birth of our universe. What if our universe is simply a bubble within a much larger multiverse, which is constantly undergoing what's called eternal inflation, expanding, and every now and again bubbles appear in this, what's called the inflaton field. Our universe is one bubble. Our Big Bang was the first moment of our universe, but time existed before it. There's some sort of time of the multiverse that is distinct from the time that we experience in our universe. So that's a possibility, that time really does stretch back to infinity. There are other notions that suggest that maybe the Big Bang was the beginning of our universe, but there's a mirror universe heading in the opposite direction. So time for us moves forward. There's a reflection of our universe moving in the opposite direction. If there's any intelligent life in that universe, they would regard their time as moving forward, and our universe's time is moving backwards, even though we could never ever have access to each other's universes. Then there are notions like time being cyclic, that the Big Bang will evolve forward in time, and the universe will recollapse again in a big crunch, which would form another generation, another universe. And again, this suggests that time, the universe has been constantly being created and destroyed again and again for all eternity. So again, the Big Bang may not have been the first moment in time. Of course, one should also say that once you bring quantum mechanics into the picture, then that notion of a distinct moment, the beginning of time, what's called a singularity of space-time, that gets fuzzy. Quantum mechanics brings in fuzziness, it brings in uncertainty, suggesting just like relativity brings in a fuzziness in what we call now, because of the relativity of simultaneity, quantum mechanics brings in a fuzziness to that earliest moment of the creation of space and time. These are theoretical speculations. One may even argue as to whether they are real scientific theories, because we don't yet know how we might test them. What observations can we make that would give us evidence that those theories are correct? Maybe sometime in the future we'll be able to tell that. But for the moment, most physicists, cosmologists would argue that the Big Bang was the beginning of time and leave it at that. Of course, the other question then is, does time have an end? Does that arrow continue into infinity, or does time come to an end? And again, there are various options. So one option indeed is that one day the universe will reach a point of maximum expansion and then recollapse in on itself into a big crunch, and that would be then the end of time. Maybe that big crunch then becomes the Big Bang for the next generation universe, in which time becomes cyclic. But what we think now is that the universe will continue to expand forever, ending in what's called the heat death. And this will be billions, trillions of years into the future. But it would suggest that time would carry on forever. Now, the reason for that is because just over a quarter of a century ago, astronomers discovered that what we thought should be happening, which is that space is slowing down in its expansion because gravity of all the matter and energy in the universe should be putting the brakes on. No one anticipated that it would start expanding at an ever faster rate. Now, that was what was discovered in 1998 when astronomers looked at the rate of expansion by looking at very distant galaxies and working backwards to figure out that actually the universe is getting bigger now at a faster rate than it was in the past. This suggests that it will never recollapse in on itself. It will just carry on expanding forever. And we're left with this, one might argue, bleak scenario, although I never know why. Why is it a bleaker scenario for the heat death of the universe? Why is that bleaker than the Big Crunch, which is quite catastrophic in my view? But the heat death of the universe will be the ultimate fate of our universe. When all the stars stop shining, they convert all their nuclear fuel, use it all up, and they die. Some will collapse into black holes. Matter will gradually get colder. Black holes will evaporate, according to Stephen Hawking, what's called Hawking radiation, just giving out thermal radiation, and the black holes will then shrink and disappear. Ultimately, the universe will just end up emptier and emptier, just full of thermal radiation that's getting colder and colder and colder. Now, of course, this will be a universe in thermal equilibrium, which comes back to this other idea that, well, will time cease to exist at thermal equilibrium? Well, no. If we were able to, or if a Boltzmann brain were to suddenly appear out of the fluctuation of thermal equilibrium, and that Boltzmann brain could think and just through sheer chance it evolved some way of seeing the universe around it, it will see the rest of the universe in a thermal equilibrium, and it wouldn't be able to discern the directionality to time. But time would still exist. The universe, if it's going to expand forever, will continue to expand, and there will be a directionality to time in the direction of the expansion of the universe, in the direction of the further cooling down of the radiation that's left in the universe. So in that sense, time would go on forever. It would be a very boring universe. Nothing would happen. But just because nothing is happening doesn't mean there isn't time continuing, because that would be defined by the continuing expansion of space. Now, of course, there is a third scenario, which is that the expansion of space, which we now understand is due to what's called dark energy, the nature of which we're still trying to determine for sure. Dark energy is making the universe expand ever more quickly. It's winning the battle against gravity. So gravity of all the stuff in the universe is trying to slow the stretching of space. Dark energy is making space stretch and expand ever more quickly. We still don't know the details of dark energy, and it may be that this is something with an influence that will grow over time. So the expansion will get ever quicker and become evident at ever smaller scales, ending up with what's called the Big Rip, in which it's not just the space between galaxy clusters, the emptiness of space that's stretching, but even the space within galaxies, within stars, within planets, within atoms, ultimately will start to spread and increase and rip the universe apart. None of this we need worry about. There's no existential threat to us. We should be much more worried about when our sun stops shining, or indeed more worried about looking after our own planet in the near future, not worrying about what's going to happen to the universe trillions of years into the future. But all those options are open. My bet would be then, I guess, and this is not the way physicists should argue, just I have a feeling or opinion, but my view is that the universe did have a beginning, but won't have an end. Keep on going forever. Which, when I think about it, I realize also is probably not that sensible. Maybe if it doesn't have an end, it shouldn't have a beginning either. Maybe time is eternal in both directions. There we go. This is where we shrug and turn to the philosophers to help us out.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.